I'm just going to get started straight away. Good morning. Welcome to a very environmentally aware live we've got this morning. We are going to be looking at the issue of sea level rise. And this is something that I know that Matt's touched upon already in some of his lives, and that a lot of you have asked about as well, to kind of cover some of these impacts of climate change and be able to explain this, kind of be able to be confident explaining what the causes are of this, and kind of who is vulnerable and why they're vulnerable as well. I'm going to give you a chance to think about the question I have on the screen, which is, why are these walruses making sea levels rise? Or are they? And now, I'm not judging the walruses on their size, but that's a little hint as to what this might be relating to. Okay, I'm just going to get the chat up, by the way. If I'm not replying on the chat, this is because I'm just logging in. So just to get you started, these lovely big walruses, what have they got to do with sea level rise? And if anyone saw the Planet Earth, I think it was Planet Earth, the David Attenborough second series, you might have seen the really harrowing scenes of the walruses having to share the space on the ice in their breeding season, and them having less. I don't know whether it's like a phenomenon. I think it is a phenomenon that happens all the time, but because there's more competition for space, and in the breeding season, due to kind of it coming earlier, I think, because of temperatures warming up, this is the reason. I'm just going to quickly find the login. If people are chatting away, keep chatting, because I should have my login ready, but I don't. Prepared and organised as always. Do not take me as a horrible warning, not an example, or whatever they say. My mum always says that. Okay, right, we are in business, hopefully. Let's go. Yes, okay, great. Morning, Angel. Hello. This is Hannah. You know who I am. Is anyone else there? Miz said they definitely need the ice. Yeah, they do. These poor walruses. I feel for them in many ways. Anyone got any other ideas? What are they like? Are they completely innocent? Have these walruses got absolutely nothing to do with sea level rise? Am I just putting them up there because I think they look funny? I'm being a bit judgy of the walruses. Hi, Sarah. Good morning. This is Hannah doing the geography. Welcome. Right, the ice warming up would definitely make it melt, right? The walrus bodies on top of the ice definitely gonna have something to do with it melting. They might not be the main cause of the ice melting, but they might have, they might add to this phenomenon. Okay, so this relates a bit to what we're going to talk about today. The ice is melting. Ice melt. Okay, they could be weakening. Leonardo said they may be weakening the ice. They're breaking it. They're breaking it down. What else is going to weaken the ice? So apart from it melting, it warming up, like from above, what else is warming it up? Is it just the walruses sitting on top? They look pretty happy. Yeah, Miz, you're right. They look pretty happy to be there, but he doesn't look pretty happy. He looks pretty grumpy. Because he's grumpy, because I'm using it as an example. Okay, the sun has something to do with it, but what about, is it just the sun that's causing the ice to melt? The nice walruses adding to this, like we said, but is it just the sun? Rudy said greenhouse gases. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into this, the causes of temperatures increasing. It's got something to do with the sea. What's happening to sea temperature? Okay, Megan got there. Good. I think the delay, you probably got there already, Megan, before I managed to clock in. Right. So the sea temperatures are a massive. This is a massive issue. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about the places in the world that are most vulnerable to sea level rise. And before we get into that, before we look at the actual, we're going to look at like the physical places, and we'll think about some countries as well. You're going to make some predictions as to where you think might be vulnerable and why they might be vulnerable as well. Okay, so the walruses, are they making sea levels rise? Maybe not. They're not helping because the ice is definitely warmer with their nice big bodies on it. But they are going to be the victims. They are the victims of some of this sea level rise. Okay, hello everyone. I'm glad there's lots of people on the chat and it's very nice. Keep chatting. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so on the screen there are 4. Hello, morning Maddie, morning Iris. Good morning Leonardo. I think I've said hello to you as well, and Rebecca. Welcome back. But we got some new faces. It's great. So on the screen are 4 causes of sea level rise. So before we get into who and where might be underwater in 100 years' time, which sounds a bit scary, but we're going to look at the probability of this. What are the actual causes of sea level rise? There are 4 of them. Can anyone identify them from the images that I've just that I've put up on the screen? Any ideas? Okay, some of you said ice caps and ice melting. Does anyone know where, in terms of land ice? So we want to be clear about the difference between land ice and sea ice. Okay, so does anyone know what's in the what kind of land ice is pictured here? Glacier, good. Nihal's got it straight away. Fantastic. So land ice is one of the causes. Okay, where in the world has the largest glaciers and the largest volume of land ice? Where in the world would we find this? Right, Mears has said straight away, has said Antarctica. Absolutely right. So Antarctica, obviously in the South Pole, the continent of Antarctica has some of the largest glaciers in the world. The longest glacier in the world, I believe, I think it's called the Saint Joseph, and it's like 400 kilometers long. And a glacier is essentially a big river of ice. And what we're doing using satellite images, some people have said the Himalayas as well. Good. Absolutely. This is, funnily enough, the Himalayas, though, this is causing like very localized flooding because of the meltwater from glaciers causing rivers to flood in countries like Bangladesh and India. But the north, you're right, Sarah's hit the nail on the head, and a few of the others. Antarctica and Greenland are the 2 places we need to be really worried about. And this is because warming is happening. Megan got there. Just, I think, the delay. Oh, Megan, I'll trust you got there before me. So Antarctica and Greenland are where we're seeing the most rapid increase in temperatures. So at the extremes of the Earth, so at the North and South Pole, that's where we see temperatures increasing more quickly. And this has something to do with the reason for that we're going to go through in a second, okay? But land ice, including glaciers, and this is a glacier, is what we really need to be worried about. Okay, what about number 2? What am I getting at with number 2? What is 2? How does 2 relate to the causes of sea level rise? Guesses. Not to do with gases. obviously greenhouse gases, methane, CO2, nitrogen dioxide, all greenhouse gases that add to the greenhouse effect, that trap more solar radiation inside the Earth's atmosphere, leads to temperatures increasing. But okay, Leonardo's got it. Boiling water. Now, does anyone know what it's called when the sea expands in size due to it getting warmer? Does anyone know the posh term for it getting... So because the sea temperatures are increasing, it's actually... Oh, here we go. SPGS. Got to insert it straight away. Thermal expansion, okay? Now, thermal expansion is something that we forget about in terms of the sea level actually rising. Because of the sea getting warmer, it actually increases in volume. And it's a bit like when you boil a kettle. Great, a few of you got this already. Really, really good. Thank you, Rudo, as well. Okay. So don't forget about thermal expansion, because this increases the volume of water in the sea. And obviously this is going to affect, for example, places like the Gulf of Mexico, and shallower seas around the Caribbean, where this is going to actually increase the rate of sea level rise because of it getting warmer. And this is also going to add to the incidence of, the events like hurricanes and storms as well. Cool, thanks, Rudel. Okay, we've got 2. We need number 1 and number 4. So I've talked about land ice, talked about sea temperature and thermal expansion. What is number 4 and what is number 1 referring to? These are the final 2 reasons why sea levels are rising. Right, so Rebecca said icebergs. You're absolutely right. This is called sea ice, okay? So imagine the sea ice itself is obviously floating on top of the sea surface, okay? So it's iceberg, for example, floating in the water. Some of it's obviously above water, but generally, when you put an ice cube into a glass of water, it causes the water in the glass to rise. That's because the volume of the ice has been added to the water, okay? So that's really, really important, because that means, again, the volume of water from sea ice is going to the stuff that's floating above the surface of the water is now going to be in the sea if it melts. And sea ice cover, we know, has reduced, but the actual amount that's melting into the sea, again, is increasing every year. But in the winter, the expanse is less of it, but there's still more of it that's melting into the sea. Now, Iris and Beth have said evaporation for number 4. It's not actually to do with evaporation. I'll give you a clue. It's to do with white surfaces. So think snow and ice in mountains, glaciers. Why are white surfaces important? Oh, sorry. Augmentus has already said the albedo effect. Has anyone heard of this before? Right, yeah, absolutely. Rebecca's nailed it. So the white surfaces, like ice, like sea ice, glaciers, snow, anything that's white, reflects sunlight. And so you get what we call a positive feedback loop. So it's not actually positive. It means that as more sea ice melts, less sunlight is going to be reflected back into space. Okay? And this means that the sea ice obviously decreases, the amount of white surfaces decreases, and that leads to the albedo effect gradually becoming less powerful. So it means that more heat is being absorbed. Yeah, Angel's done a really good summary of this, okay? So less and less ice is being, infrared solar radiation. Great. Okay, we are halfway through. So we're going to now, we've got, as a little summary, if we're going to look at where's underwater, we need to know why they're going to be underwater. So we've got sea ice melting, sea temperatures increasing, so thermal expansion, land ice melting, glaciers melting in Antarctica and Greenland, and then the albedo effect. Okay? Really, really important. Great. So don't forget those four. This, if you're doing GCSE geography, these are the kind of things that you would have to explain. But the next stuff we're going to look at, less GCSE, more let's think beyond that. Okay. So where in the world do you think is vulnerable to sea level rise? If you're going to predict where is going to be underwater, what factors would make them vulnerable to sea level rise? Oh, we've got places coming in, but why is Bangladesh, Netherlands, Galapagos Islands, Tuvalu? Because they're low lying. Okay, so if they are below sea level or low lying, so low lying could even be 10 meters above sea level. Okay, doesn't have to be, 50 meters above sea level. It can be 10 to 20 meters. So low lying, absolutely. Lowland areas, places even below sea level. People have mentioned Bangladesh. There's something crazy like 70% of Bangladesh is only 1 meter above sea level. And as Megan has said, most of it is a river delta, a delta of the Ganges. So it means that in a delta, it's where you get deposition at the end of the river, but the land itself is very, very low because it's literally just been formed by that river deposition. And it's also in the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh, which is a really shallow sea, and that means that the sea is really warm, so they're very vulnerable to tropical storms. So let's think about tropical storms as well. What other places are vulnerable to tropical storms? Where might you get flooding from tropical storms? Okay, areas that are rapidly heating up. Yeah, absolutely. So, Mark, as we spoke about, the Caribbean, so the Gulf of Mexico, Marker, this might be a place where, this will be a place where sea level increases more quickly. People said South America, the Caribbean. So, okay, yeah, absolutely. So the tropical storms, generally tropical storms they do happen between 8 and 20 degrees north and south of the equator, okay? So all of these areas, north and south of the equator, are going to be countries like in the Caribbean, anywhere in the Indian Ocean that experiences tropical storms, parts of East Africa, are going to be very vulnerable, okay? So we said low-lying and tropical storms, and we've said some countries. People have said Florida. Yeah, interesting. Florida, again, part of a river delta. Leonardo said Mexico. Yeah, some parts of Mexico, definitely. Especially now, what we're missing from people's contributions are the human factors that make a place vulnerable. What's going to make some of these countries, and some people have mentioned actual islands as well. Megan's been mentioning islands, the island of Kiribati, so Tuvalu and Kiribati in the Pacific Ocean. Right, building on land. If you build loads of, okay, this is a really interesting one that Maddie's brought up, okay? If you build lots of skyscrapers and heavy concrete buildings on land that used to be part of a river delta, what do you think is going to happen to the land? People have said building on floodplains, Maddie, absolutely right. What's going to happen to the land if you're building a big skyscraper? It's surface runoff, yes, absolutely. Maddie's nailing all the geography terms, this is great. You're going to create more impermeable surfaces, which means that if it does rain or the river levels get too high, it means that it'll fill up more quickly, absolutely. What's going to happen to the land if you build on it? I'll ask one more time. Building on. So let's think cities, big concrete skyscrapers Okay, I'm going to tell you. The land sinks. So because it's called land subsidence, okay, SPGS, got it. So it's called land subsidence, and this means that the levels above sea level obviously are going down, and it means that these places are more vulnerable. So think about population density, think about cities. Now, some of you already mentioned the Netherlands, and this is it's a really crazy one because actually I'm going to show you a map just now. Don't know why I'm going for the cities. I'm just really want to write it. Okay. So, as you can see from this map, this is if sea levels rose by 1 meter. So this is by around 2120, 30. This is the prediction for sea level rise if we stick to a high level of CO2 emissions. So if we have a high, we don't reduce our CO2 emissions as a globe, and we don't reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, right? So 1/3 of the Netherlands is below sea level, and this is because a lot of the land itself used to be like a bit like a delta, and it's what we call reclaimed land. So they essentially added land that was below sea level. They added sort of sand and soil on top, and this was even in like the 14th century. It's crazy, and they literally built the land up to be just above sea level. So this means in the Netherlands they have a huge population that live on the coast, and this is a classic example of a place country that's going to have to invest loads of money into sea defences and to be able to protect itself, okay? I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to now move on. So these are the places, if we're going to answer this question of who is going to be underwater in 100 years' time, these places are pretty likely to be underwater in 100 years' time. So if you can spot some of the cities where you live, I'm sorry. Sorry to burst your bubble. But these are the most vulnerable urban populations, okay? Some people said Dubai. I think Dubai might be on here somewhere up here maybe. Yeah, Dubai would be here. Now, we are going to look at 2 examples, and we're going to compare these examples, okay? In terms of who is most vulnerable to sea level rise. So, in terms of projections, if we reduce our CO2 emissions, it's projected, so this is like a guess, that sea levels will rise by 30 centimetres. So remember the map that I showed you of the Netherlands just before, that was at 1 metre sea level. So 30 centimetres by 2100, okay? And this is in 100 years, so I'm like basing it on, obviously that would be in 80 years, but this is by 2100, okay? So, however, if we follow a path of high emissions, so this is like the highest possible CO2 emissions we could have, countries aren't agreeing to the emissions targets that they set themselves, all of the ways that we are trying to get sort of countries to innovate to reduce CO2 emissions doesn't work. We still have really high emissions targets. We still hit high emissions targets. That means that by 2100, there'll be 2.5 metres of sea level rise. And Maddie is absolutely right. If we all went vegan, there would be far less CO2 in the atmosphere. And I think Matt's definitely done his no beef live. And if anyone wants some more diet related, I don't know why my pad is being so slow. I'm just going to plug it in. Bear with me a second. So we are going to compare, that was meant to say 2100, by the way, not just 210. We're going back in time. So let's have a think about this. So we're going to compare 2 places, New York and Jakarta. Does anyone know where Jakarta is? Jakarta is in India. No. Not in India, not in Mexico. I didn't want to catch you out. I'm not just like this is classic geography teacher thing to do, isn't it? Be like, where is this city? Philippines, very close. Amelia is the closest, not in the Philippines. It is the capital of Jakarta is here, is the capital of Indonesia. Okay. Now I'm going to give you some statistics about these two cities. We're going to look at New York in the USA, and we're going to look at Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia. SBGS got it right first. I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I'll make sure I'm being. I keep forgetting about the delay, but I will remember it. So we're going to look at New York and Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia. Okay, and that's where they are. Really important to know where they are. So, has anyone played Top Trumps before? My favourite game. Played it loads as a kid. Spent so much time trading with my brother Top Trumps cards. Great game. Okay, great, good. So, we're going to look at 4 statistics. GDP per capita, population growth, population density, and metres above sea level. Okay? And I'm going to tell you them now. So, New York, GDP per capita is $72,000 a year per person. Okay, so it's a very wealthy city, and we would expect that because the USA is a developed country. Okay, it's a high income country. Glad Maddie loves Top Trumps like me too. New York has population growth of 2.7% per year, which actually for a developed country city is really high. So, and this is mainly, and remember this, for low income workers. So a lot of the people trying to find houses are going to parts of the city that are less valuable. They aren't finding property that's very valuable. So Manhattan Island, which you might have heard of in TV shows like Friends, Sex and the City, Manhattan Island has some of the most valuable real estate in the world. It's said that Manhattan Island has $129 billion worth of real estate, so property, that is in a flood area of New York. So the flood risk area of New York. So New York is vulnerable, very vulnerable to flood events. Really quickly to finish, population density is 10,194 kilometers squared. So that's 10,194 people, very funny per kilometre squared. So that means a square kilometre means a kilometre by a kilometre by a kilometre by a kilometre, okay? Which is really high. Dynamite seems to have an opinion about New York's social distancing. Possibly, there's a lot. It's very difficult in a city so densely populated to socially distance at the moment, I imagine. So it's good. It's a good point, but it must be very difficult. In terms of meters above sea level, it is approximately 10 meters above sea level. Now, what's going to happen? What's going to make New York, because the sea levels aren't likely to rise by 10 meters in the next 100 years. But what is going to make New York vulnerable to flooding, to being underwater? If it's 10 meters above sea level, why am I talking about New York? Sounds like it might be a bit irrelevant. What's going to make it vulnerable to sea level rise? Somebody saying concrete. Yeah, good. I'm glad people know about impermeable surfaces. It's like important geography. It's not to do with concrete though. Think back to the what we looked at already with our predictions. What's going to make... It's on the coast, yeah, absolutely, Amelia. It is on the coast. Land subsidence might be an issue. Oh, Dynamite says he lives in the Netherlands, so you can... some of it's underwater already. Storms, right, Miz, here we go. Thank you, Miz. So, Hurricane Sandy you might have heard of, happened in 2012. And 90,000 buildings were flooded in New York, which sounds like an obsolete number, like a random number, but that's a lot. And think about the value of property as well, that $129 billion of property. 2 million people in a city, remember, this is a developed country city, lost electricity for over 48 hours. And sewage systems were flooded, electricity stations were damaged, caused a huge amount. Okay, Angel said that she grew up in Jersey, fascinating, and Sandy hit New Jersey as well, yeah, massively. Oh, I'm so sorry that she said that her friends lost their home and lost everything. I'm really sorry to hear that, Angel. But that just shows how a city that, even though it's 10 meters above sea level, this is what I'm trying to get you to realize, is that actually with more tropical storms, with more intense storms because of climate change, these places are going to be really vulnerable. Okay. So Jakarta. Now, this is an important one. And I'll zoom out a little bit when we get to comparing it. So Jakarta has a GDP per capita of, this is the capital of Indonesia, $3,890 a year. Remember, New York was $72,000 a year. And think about why this is relevant as well. Population growth is actually only at 1.23%, even though you think maybe there's lots of migration into a city like Jakarta to get jobs. Population growth only 1.22%. And then finally, population density is 14,000 per square kilometre. So remember, New York was 10,000, 14,000 per square kilometre for Jakarta. And then meters above sea level, now this is the clincher, okay? 90% of Jakarta lies below sea level. And a lot of this 90%, it's actually physically below sea level. A lot of this area, 60% of the population, so 60% of the 10 million people that live in Jakarta, so 6 million people, live in informal houses. And this means like what we call kind of slums, like often you might learn about that in geography and call them slums or favelas. But this means that those houses that are built really close to the sea and are often quite, not particularly strong, not made of massively strong materials, they're incredibly vulnerable to sea level rise. So 6 million people are in this vulnerable position. Now, obviously that sounds really bad. Yeah, Maddie, you should have done geography A level. Sorry if you can always do it as a mixed subject at university. Like you can do a mixed humanities course. That's very common. Anyway, out of Jakarta, so Jakarta, Indonesia, developing country, GDP per capita is $3,890 a year. Look at those final statistics. Okay, and New York, which city do you think is most vulnerable to sea level rise? Who is more likely to be underwater in 100 years' time? Let's see if I can zoom out to so you can see it. I don't know if the writing's going to be a little bit small. If you can see it. What do we think? New York or Jakarta? Okay, why are we saying Jakarta? Why in 100 years' time? What's the factor that makes Jakarta so vulnerable to sea level rise? Leonardo's saying New York. This is if storms increase, if we get more storm surges, that means the sea kind of pushing, rising because of high winds and pushing into the city. Storm surges could make New York more vulnerable. Yeah, Angel's hit the nail on the head. So Jakarta, because so much of it is physically below sea level. And what that means is that if they don't invest in sea defences, in trying to either relocate certain informal settlements, they might actually build a sea wall. The government of Jakarta might not be able to afford to put these measures in place. So actually, the city most likely, and the amount of people most likely to be underwater is unfortunately that 6 million people living in informal settlements. on the coast. Yeah, it is. They're both on the coast, by the way, Jakarta and New York. Maddie as well. Good question. Okay, so to recap, okay, we have cities all across the world, including New York and Jakarta, that have really high population densities. And if CO2 emissions remain at the level that they are, they increase, and that we have the highest projection of CO2 emissions, this 2.5 meter sea level rise is likely. Okay, this is if we don't all, like, the world doesn't come together and agree that CO2 emissions are one of the biggest crises, like, facing our planet. Okay, so this is by 2100. So remember that year, remember that amount of sea level rise, remember the cities we've talked about, the people that are going to be affected. And when you're discussing this in terms of trying to, maybe persuade someone of the reasons why they should reduce their CO2 emissions as an individual and not buy products from companies that are contributing towards this, maybe go veggie for a few days a week. All of this is really powerful knowledge that you can draw upon. Okay, so I hope that you found this interesting. Let's just do a final quick shout out to some people. Nihal, welcome. There's people who I haven't recognized before, which is so nice. Like, really great to see some new faces. Maddie, I think, is returning. Thanks so much, Maddie. Megan, Rebecca, Angel, all really active on the chat. Leonardo, thanks so much for your contributions. Really great to hear personal stories as well. Thank you, Angel, for sharing that with your discussion about Hurricane Sandy. Welcome, Rudo. Welcome, G. Who was it that was making great comments before and was jumping in there? But yeah, if I've forgotten anyone, apologies. But really, really thank you for being here and being part of this. Things to look forward to this week. Matt is doing a brilliant talk on cryptocurrencies. He's going to be looking at why would you rather be female or male and how that works. Okay. And thanks everyone. Some nice chats, some nice comments coming on the chat. That's nice. Thank you so much. So well brought up. So thank you. And we've got Nish is going to be talking about kind of philosophy of the self. And we've got some brilliant workshops with Phil as well on poetry. So check out the schedule. There is some amazing lessons going on this week. So please, please, please get involved. GCSE chat, if you would like a climate change lesson on GCSE, the GCSE geography that you would do on climate change, let me know, because I would love to do a more GCSE specific lesson. So do feedback and say whether you would like this, and we'll do a little trial of some GCSE stuff if you want to get that in there early, or you're doing GCSEs next year and you're in year 10, or it's just you're maybe at that stage in another part of the world as well. But thanks so much, everyone, and take care of yourselves, be safe, and I'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. for some more social geography. So we're going to answer the question, should doctors and cleaners be paid the same? So if you wanted to come and join in with that at 6 p.m, please do. Okay, bye people. Have a good rest of the day.